It began with a reflection that shouldn't have existed. When the night manager of the Halberd Inn unlocked room 313, he expected the usual: the smell of stale smoke, the dim buzz of an old fluorescent bulb, maybe another guest who skipped out on their bill. Instead, he found something that froze him where he stood. The mirror above the dresser showed the room as it had looked years ago: freshly painted wallpaper, furniture polished to a shine, a vase of white lilies that hadn't been there in decades. But it wasn't just the past that stared back at him. In the reflection sat a man on the bed, still, silent, eyes locked on him. The manager took one step forward. The man did the same. Then he realized it wasn't someone else. It was himself. 3 days later, the night manager's keys were found in the hallway. His car still in the lot. His room untouched. He was never seen again. Detective Alan Graves stood at the door of room 313, coat collar turned up against the draft that whistled down the empty hallway. The Halberd Inn was a dying place, a brick skeleton on the edge of town, long past caring who stayed or who didn't. The flicker of the corridor light gave everything the pulse of a nervous eye. Alan had been called for missing persons before, but something about this case had crawled under his skin before he even arrived. Maybe it was the silence on the phone when Mrs. Bellamy, the owner, had said the words, "It's happened again." Maybe it was the number, 313, the same as the one in his dreams. The air inside the room felt thick, metallic. The smell of mildew and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers, hung in the air. The mirror was impossible to ignore. It took up nearly the entire wall above the dresser, its edges warped, the glass slightly fogged. He stepped closer, watching his reflection follow, but just a beat too slow. He frowned, whispering to himself, "Not again." Downstairs, Mrs. Bellamy wrung her hands, twisting her wedding ring until the skin beneath turned white. She was small and pale, her hair gray in clumps, her eyes darting toward the staircase every few seconds as if expecting someone to come down who never would. "It started with a sound," she murmured, her voice barely carrying. "A knocking. Behind the mirror. I thought it was the pipes at first. But then the guests began to complain. They said they heard voices. Saw people." Alan took notes absently. "What kind of people?" "Ones who weren't supposed to be there," she said. "Ones who looked like them." He looked up. "You mean reflections?" She nodded, almost relieved he'd said it for her. "They'd say their reflections moved differently. Smiled when they didn't. Sometimes they'd turn away and still see their faces looking back." Alan clicked his pen shut. "When was this room last rented?" Her lips trembled. "No one stayed there since the incident." "Since 1997. He paused. "What incident?" She met his eyes with quiet dread. "Since you checked in, Detective Graves." Alan felt something twist deep inside him. "That's impossible." Her voice cracked. "You came here to investigate a missing woman, Margaret Heller. But after that week, you never came back. We thought you'd moved on." Alan stared at her, confusion and nausea rising like a tide. He turned and walked back upstairs without another word. The key turned stiffly in the door. Room 313 groaned as he entered. The air was colder than before, unnaturally so. His breath misted faintly. The mirror dominated the far wall like an open wound in the room. He stepped closer, drawn to it against his better judgment. The reflection showed the room again, but subtly different. The bed was neatly made. The lamp was on, though his was off, and there was someone sitting on the bed, back turned toward him. "Hey," Alan said, voice rough. The figure didn't move. He took a step closer. The floor creaked. The man in the reflection turned slowly, and Alan's stomach lurched. It was him. Younger. Healthier. Eyes brighter, face unlined. The younger Alan smiled faintly, but in the wrong way. There was no warmth behind it. Just recognition. Alan stumbled back, his heel catching on the rug. The lamp behind him flickered once and went out. When the light returned, the reflection was normal again. He stared at his shaking hands. "It's a trick of the light," he whispered. "That's all." But he didn't believe himself. He pulled open his briefcase. Inside was a single folder, yellowed and thin. The cover read, "Margaret Heller, missing person." He opened it slowly. The black and white photo showed a young woman, smiling faintly, eyes distant. The report beneath it bore his own handwriting. The signature at the bottom, Detective Alan Graves. His vision swam. He felt suddenly dizzy. He had investigated this place before. He had been here. So why couldn't he remember? He turned back toward the mirror. The glass shimmered, vibrating slightly, as though alive. Then came the sound. Knock, knock, knock. A hollow, deliberate rhythm from behind the glass. Alan froze. The knocks grew louder, more desperate. Then a hand. A pale, trembling hand pressed against the inside of the mirror, fingers splayed wide. And then a face. Margaret. Her eyes wide, terrified, mouth moving silently. Alan stumbled forward. "Margaret." Her lips formed the words again and again, barely audible through the static hum that filled the room. "Help me. Alan, please." The glass began to crack beneath her touch, spiderwebbing across the surface. He pressed his hand against the glass. It was icy cold. The vibration thrummed up his arm, numbing his fingers. "Margaret," he whispered. "I'm here. I'll get you out." The mirror pulsed once, then gave way. Alan fell forward into darkness. The air vanished, replaced by damp, suffocating silence. For a moment, he thought he was dead. Then light returned. He blinked and gasped. He was in room 313 again. But it was new. The wallpaper was fresh, the air clean, the smell of lilies in the corner. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. And on the bed sat Margaret Heller, alive. "You came back," she whispered. Alan's voice shook. Where am I?" She smiled sadly. "You never left." He stared at her. "It's not possible. I'm not. This isn't real." Margaret rose slowly from the bed, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor. "You promised you'd help me, Alan. You said you'd protect me." "I did," he said, though the words tasted wrong. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then why did you kill me?" The room seemed to tilt. Alan's knees buckled. No, I didn't." But then memory surged like a flood. A rain-soaked night, a fight in the hallway, the gun, her scream. The flash. The silence. He had buried it. Hidden it even from himself. He looked down at his hands, and froze. They were younger again. Steady. Unscarred. In the mirror, the older version of him stared back in horror. The two Allens locked eyes. The younger one smiled. "You can't escape the reflection," he said softly. "One of us has to stay." The mirror pulsed violently. The air warped around them. Alan felt himself being pulled backward, the world collapsing into static and shadow. He clawed at the walls, at the bedpost, at the floor, but the pull was too strong. The younger version reached out through the glass and whispered, "Goodbye, detective." Then came the shattering. A sound like the world breaking in half. The next morning, Mrs. Bellamy unlocked room 313. The mirror was pristine. No cracks, no dust, no trace of damage. Only a faint, fresh fingerprint in the center of the glass. And in the reflection, if you looked closely, you could see a man sitting on the bed, one who wasn't there in the room. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind rattled the windows, guests said they heard faint knocking from the other side of the glass. Weeks later, a new detective arrived to collect Alan Graves' belongings. In his notebook, the final line was scrawled in shaking handwriting. "The mirror shows what you hide. And it never forgets."